Good evening and welcome to this session on year-round stewardship formation. My name is Davey Gerhard. I'm the Executive Director of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. And I think we are the Diocese of San Diego talking about this topic. I'm not quite sure how this presentation is meant to run because I don't see any participants. But when I logged in, it was recording. So I'm thinking maybe something's happening. Someone's watching this somewhere. So I'm going to go through my 45-minute presentation, sharing my screen. And if somebody watches it one day, that'll be lovely. I will share my screen now. Year-round stewardship formation is something that is really important in the church, I believe. We need to think about how to form our flocks theologically and get them prepared for our fundraising efforts, if those come in the fall or in the spring or whenever they come. If the first time they hear about them is when we're starting our campaign, we've missed out on something. So this presentation is about how to help us get in the mindset of year-round stewardship formation. Our learning objectives this evening are learning how to separate stewardship from fundraising. So let's try and separate out those words. Let's try to understand how these two things are different. And I see someone who has joined us. Hi, Chris.
Hey there, Davey.
How are you?
I'm Chris Tumulty. I'm the communications director for EDSD. I'm going to be your moderator for the evening.
Great.
So let me know if there are any troublemakers.
Well, it seems like we are just getting started and I have a slideshow ready to go. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, so I started presenting to an empty room. But I will wait for some folks to show up. I'm so glad people are here.
Yep. Folks should be showing up here over the next couple minutes and we can get going.
Great. Good evening. It's nice to see people joining. And I know that we have a limited amount of time, but I am going to give us a little bit of time so that the room fills up a bit before we get started here. Nice to see y'all. We might be the people who are here, and so I know our time is limited. I want us to get started. If folks show up, we'll save some back pews for them like good Episcopalians, and they can catch up with us. Through this evening's presentation, I'll be using a slideshow, and so I won't be able to see most of you. So that means if you're trying to get my attention, please use your reaction button at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand. That'll put you to the top of my list and I'll see that you are trying to reach me. And as you have questions, please type them into the chat. I'll be looking at the chat every few slides, and I'll stop at least once in the presentation to catch up on any questions that you might have or ask for more questions at that time. It looks like this is being recorded, and I want to respect your privacy and your concerns. So if you don't want your face shared on something that will be posted on a diocesan website, for example, click off your camera. Otherwise, if you're good with it, I'm good with it. That said, it looks like we've got 17 folks in the room, and I'd like us to get started. My name is Davey Gerhard, and I am the Executive Director of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. I'm based here in San Francisco, so I'm in your time zone, but in a slightly different climate. And I'm happy to be beaming into your living rooms or your kitchens or wherever you are this evening. Thanks for having me. This evening, our learning objectives, I want us to learn how to separate our stewardship from our fundraising. So what do I mean by that? Well, I think these two words have become synonyms for each other in church, and I want us to encourage us to tease them apart a little bit, to see how, in fact, our stewardship, which is the theology, the ideas about abundance and generosity that we have, are separate from our pledge campaigns and our fundraising. They inform each other, of course, but they're separate entities. We're going to talk about growing generosity, some formation practices that we can engage with individually or corporately throughout the year to help get us ready, prime the pump, as it were, for our pledge campaign when it comes time, or whatever fundraising activity our churches participate in. And then we're going to talk about building out a calendar of stewardship-focused activities, things you can implement this year or in coming years in your congregation to inculcate this attitude of generosity and formation. Throughout this evening, one of the things I want to underline is that formation is important year-round for our fundraising and for our stewardship. If the first time your congregation is hearing about or thinking about generosity, abundance, stewardship is right as the pledge campaign is beginning, I'd say that's probably a little too late. We need to have started that work earlier and done some real intention and formation with our congregations so that they can be ready to be generous. That's what we'll be going through this evening. So if stewardship isn't about fundraising, then what is it? I would recommend that it's about how we create impact in our community. And stewardship is a way to frame all of the gifts that we've been given by God and all of the things that we bring into our community. It's our training and our learning, the things that we've gone to school for, or the things we've picked up in our lives. It's our effort and our work product. It's how our skills are operationalized, how we have learned tools and how we use them and employ them. It's our spending and our saving. Everything we do with money is a stewardship issue because it's all God's. We're given it to spend, to save, to invest, to give away. And all those important decisions that we make have a stewardship, they have a stewardship angle, they have a stewardship purpose. Every dollar has some kind of purpose for you. And so as we learn how to steward those great resources, understanding that when we make certain decisions, it impacts our ability to be generous is really important. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. It's about our wisdom and our teaching, how we form our congregations and how we use all of the gifts that we're given. Most importantly, I think stewardship is how we care for each other. Stewardship is how we look in on each other as neighbors, how we support each other, how we love each other. Creating an impact in our community is why we do the work of fundraising in church anyway. And so I want us to remember that your budget, your reason for raising money, your pledge campaigns, they are about doing the work. They are about enabling the work that we need to do in our communities. And we need to, as church, be better about telling our story, sharing with people how we do our work and what we do with the money that we raise and the gifts that we share with each other. So once a month or once a quarter or in your newsletter or from the chancel steps or however you communicate with folks, tell stories about the work you're doing Tell stories about neighbors you've met and the impact that your congregation makes. Have interviews, bring in videos, talk to people who use your services. If you have a food program or a homework program or an outreach program, and it's appropriate to bring their stories in, tell the story of what you do and measure it in metrics. This is something that our congregations are really bad about because we don't always think about the numbers behind the services that we provide. So if you're feeding people, how many people? People want to know this because it helps them understand the impact of their giving. This is particularly important, I think, when we're talking about generational differences in giving. We can go in another day and another time about all the different ways that different generations are motivated to give. But if you're trying to reach out to your younger donors, your newer members, impact is really important. Millennials and Gen Z, they want to know, what are you doing with my money? Boomers and folks older than them, they trust institutions enough that they will give to the church because the church matters to them, because it's been there for them. It's not the case with our young donors. So we need to get better about collecting data and then telling the story of what we do with our money. Everything we've been given, everything we've built, everything we have is a tool for our stewardship. And so I want us to be able to ask ourselves, how can the church use what I have, what I've been given, for its program, for its ministry, for its sustainability, for its viability? How can the church use my strength or my skills? Is there something that I could offer, a class, a workshop, a new ministry? We often say, I wish my church did this, whatever it is. And then we might ask ourselves, well, could I be the one that leads that? It's not just up to the clergy and the vestry to create new ideas. We are also idea generators. And how can my finances help the church? All of my finances, the gifts I give now, the gifts I'll give later, estate plans that I might make. How can I make wise investments to help my church grow? Stewardship is, as I said, also about our relationship and our caring for each other. Do we talk with each other during the week? Do we reach out? Maybe somebody needs us. Maybe somebody needs a call. Your congregation likely has a prayer list, a way that we tell folks that we need prayers or list them out in our prayers of the people. Take that home or look at your parish's prayer list and pray those names in the evening or on your walk or as you're walking your dog. Think about those names and think about those people and their intentions and their needs. Send social media or email or text messages on birthdays and anniversaries. If you list them in your directory or in your bulletin, reach out to your friends. Say, hey, I've been thinking about you. These are stewardship issues because they bring us close together. They also help us break down barriers, which is really important when we're talking about formation of our stewardship, asking each other to participate in the gifts that we give. Generosity isn't a skill that we all grow up with. It's a skill we learn, and it's a skill we choose to learn. We all know people who are generous, and we know people who we think of as not generous. And so the difference there is a discipline or a practice or a habit that's been grown over time. Gratitude is at the heart of our generosity, at the heart of our stewardship. So I want us to think about this as a formation exercise, things you can do in your life or in your congregation to strengthen that generosity and that formation that folks have about their own capacity to share. When we share experiences, words, stories, we're more likely to share our resources, our gifts, our talents, our time, and our treasure. All of those are important. So make it a habit. Have a gratitude practice as you're falling asleep or as you're washing your dishes or brushing your teeth. Whenever you stop and think and have a little bit of alone time, what am I grateful for today? When you see someone doing something nice, thank them on behalf of the world. Uh, these are random acts of wonder and joy and beauty. Help people understand that they're recognized. Have a weekly habit of maybe a Friday afternoon gratitude practice where you thank everyone who's helped you through the week or done something that you remember. A friend of mine taught me this, and every Friday he dedicates the last half hour or hour of his day before he shuts his laptop down to sending out emails to people who have done something great for the church. Maybe it's a kind word that they said, or maybe it's a gift that they made, or maybe it's some other way that they helped. He has this beautiful practice. And when you get a Friday email from him, it's a wonderful thing. You feel good. Um, these are practices that help us understand our own generosity and gratitude. Mostly we need to learn how to accept the gratitude that people give us. This is really hard. We feel shame when people encourage us and are grateful for us. But we too do beautiful things in the world. And so when people are thankful for it, accept the love that they're offering. We want to think positively. Assume goodwill. Why is this a stewardship question? Because when we assume the best of each other, we expect the best of each other. We expect our best gifts. We expect our best joy. We expect our best relationships. We expect our best selves. So assume goodwill. Believe when you walk into a situation that the other person wants this to work out the same way you do. Come together. Assume that everything is good, even if there's moments of frustration or conflict. Assume goodwill. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for the times that you make mistakes, those moments that make you wince and think, why did I do that? Or I could have done differently. The key to forgiving others is, of course, being able to forgive yourself. And then it's a circle, isn't it? If we keep forgiving. I think there's a passage, a parable about that. Maybe we're supposed to forgive so many times that we lose count of how many times we forgive. We should banish jaded outlooks. It's so easy to say, oh, we've done this before. We've tried this before. We always ask him for a gift and he turns us down. Well, today's the day. Try it again. Banish jaded outlooks and give second chances. This is a part of learning our own generosity and our own practice of gratitude. Finally, I want us to run through a few of these random acts, things you can do to be grateful to the world and show that generosity and learn it within yourself as well. Do some small things. Make a meal for a friend who's sick, or give them a ride to a hospital or to a doctor's appointment. Buy a cup of coffee for the next person behind you in line for no reason at all. Share your pocket change. These are things that we do to remind the world that it's a beautiful place. And maybe the person that you're reaching out to needs it that day. These random acts of generosity and kindness help us remind ourselves that we are creatures and children of God, that we belong here, that we have a life here too. We share this existence with so many others. Join a team. There are always groups of people looking to volunteer in the church and out of the church. Can your children or grandchildren's school use an extra pair of hands on a project? Is there a local nonprofit that could use your talents or your skills? Is there a project at church that needs some of your attention? Maybe you could build the sets for the pageant or coach a team, run an event, work a phone bank, have some fun while you're at it. Support a cause. Do something that is with or without your church. Nonprofits around your city need your help. Get a group of folks to go do a cleanup or volunteer in a soup kitchen or sanitize a playroom in a homeless shelter for kids. Help do wonderful things for the world and bring a group of friends with you to do it. And spread the love. Remind people that your church does great work in the world and invite them to be a part of it. This is an easy way in to evangelism, that scary E word that we use in church sometimes. Evangelism is about invitation. And when our churches are doing beautiful things, feeding people or caring for people or bringing speakers in to talk about something that may or may not be related to our faith, but is informed by our faith. These are great opportunities to share the love and bring other people with you and bring them into your own generosity and kindness. Before I move on to talking about some things you can do this year for your year-round stewardship formation, I wonder if there are any questions that you have about this. I don't see anything in the chat, which means I'm either talking too quickly or you're saving up your questions for now. Just raise your hand and come off mute and ask a question or type it into the chat box. Anything we've talked about, our generosity and gratitude practices, separating stewardship from fundraising and why you might want to do that? You're all generosity experts. I love it. Hearing and seeing no one, I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk about some practices that we can do this year, right now in church, to create that generosity feedback and get ready for your annual campaign this year. I think of this as a year of generous living. Beautiful things that we can do for each other and programs that you can run at coffee hour or rector's forum or on a Wednesday night group, things that can be done virtually or in person. We have this great tool called Zoom that allows us to bring people together and do great things. So I'm going to give you 3 different categories of stuff you can do this year. The first is our simplest, things that you can implement right now and get ready to go. And another one, we'll talk about the common language of our liturgical calendar and how we can use the big feasts and fasts of our church to create messaging around stewardship, generosity, and abundance. And then for those of you who are experts, we're going to talk about some next level year-round formation, tying your activities to your mission, to your fundraising. Generosity is a skill that's practiced, cultivated, formed through teaching, practice, and time. I love this quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who says, like humility, generosity comes from seeing that everything we have and everything we accomplish comes from God's grace and God's love for us. Certainly, it is from experiencing this generosity of God and the generosity of those in our life that we learn gratitude and to be generous to others. So this year, I'm encouraging you to try these 3 things to keep the conversation of stewardship and generosity alive. The first is a book study. You can do this in person, you can do this virtually, and I've given you 2 books that unlock the spirituality of fundraising and engage in storytelling about money. The first is The Amazing Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. One of the things I love about this book is that you can read it in about 15 minutes, but there's also a workbook that goes with it. You can buy both of them on Amazon, or you can find it through Forward Movement, other booksellers. It's a great tool, and it's full of Henry Nouwen's folksy wisdom and great, beautiful, deep thinking about generosity and spirituality. It's a good read and a great book for a congregational book study on the theology of fundraising. If you offer something like this, as I said before, when it comes time for the pledge campaign, people will be a little bit more ready for it because they will have engaged in some of this heart work, this deep thinking about fundraising and generosity. Another book that I recommend is Charles Clowen's 1 Minute Stewardship, Creative Ways to Talk About Money in Church. We think that talking about money in church is really hard, but you know, it's not. My prime example in this is to remind people that Jesus spent a heck of a lot of time in his ministry talking about money. 40% of it, actually. 16 of the 40 parables are about money, possessions, stuff, or our attachments to it. It's used either as the topic of the story or the metaphor or the lesson that we're meant to learn. Jesus talked about money a lot. Now, I'm not recommending that you all spend 40% of your time talking about money in church. I think people get pretty annoyed and pretty bored with that, but we can talk about it more than during the pledge campaign. We can talk about it a few times a year. And I'm encouraging us to do that with a book study and with some real intentional formation. Money and church, money and faith, they do go together. They can inform each other. And when we look at our money in terms of our faith, when we look at our spending and our giving in terms of our faithful practices, they become really beautiful, pastoral, rich conversations to have in church. Charles Clowen has been the planned giving officer in the Diocese of Maryland for 63 years. He's an incredible guy. He's written this and several other books, all of which can be found on Amazon or from church publishing. They're really great. Another thing that we can all try is bringing in some accountability and transparency about our budget and about the goals we set at our annual meeting, and remind people halfway through the year where we're at. You can do this in a meeting, a forum, a coffee hour, or you could do it in your bulletin or in a newsletter. Remind people about where we started the year and what we said we were going to do, and talk about where we're at. Be honest about things that are going well and things that aren't going well. So if there was a ministry that you wanted to start and it's slow, talk about it. Talk about what it needs. If you dedicated your outreach to a food program and you're feeding lots of people, report on that. Tell people how it's going. Let people know where their gifts are being spent and how they're being spent. How are we doing year to date on the budget? But spend only a little bit of time on that line item budget. Do more storytelling about the work that we're doing with each other. That's what gets us to give. That's what gets us to be motivated and to think about what we're doing. A third thing that you can try this year is to preach a sermon on generosity or stewardship at some time in the middle of the year. And this sermon should not end with, and you can fill out your pledge card at the back of the church after the sermon, right? This is just for goodness sake, let's get this message out there and talk about stewardship and abundance and joy. TENS creates what we call reflections, and we have them all throughout the summer. We have a Pentecost, a July, an August, and a September summary of the readings that you can use as sermon starter for a sermon on generosity or abundance right in the middle of the year with no pledge campaign attached to it whatsoever. You could run a rector's forum or an adult ed program on generosity just as easily using those reflections. They're 300 words with a couple of questions at the end. They're great for getting conversations started. So use these tools. Preach a sermon for no good reason on generosity other than to educate, inspire, inform. This is what we need to be doing a lot of in church. I spend a lot of my ministry doing stewardship sermons, and they're not just in October and November. I know our clergy don't always like to preach about stewardship, and so when they're feeling nervous, I get a call. Can you show up in a couple of Sundays and talk about money? I'm always happy to do it. But that's because, as I said, I remember my good buddy Jesus, who talked about money a lot, and I can do it too. I see a question has come up. Good, Allison, thank you for reminding folks that the Diocese of San Diego is a member of TENS. And so if you go onto our website, tens.org, you have access to all kinds of resources. Our pledge campaign materials, but also a resource library, webinars, teaching and training, all kinds of things you can do. Moving on past 3 easy things you can implement, let's talk a little bit about our liturgical calendar. Now, I'm not suggesting that you spend every one of these big feasts or seasons talking about money. That would get a little old, but I like to throw out the idea that within the season, within the focus of particular times of year, we can pull out or tease out stewardship themes. These can be in your letter, in your newsletter, or they can go out as little thought points. You can bring them in to a sermon or into an announcement. Help people understand that throughout the year, we have lots of opportunity to engage theologically about abundance and generosity. TENS also provides seasonal reflections. So from Advent through Pentecost, you can get a reflection that mirrors the readings of the feast day itself and talks about lessons, things you can talk about, things you can bring in. So in Advent, we focus on our gratitude for all that we receive, and we communicate our hope. Advent is that beautiful time of expectation and hoping and waiting. In Christmas, all about gifts, we talk about the gifts that we give each other and our community, our abundant love, the faithful generosity. In Epiphany, we can talk about how we manifest Christ in the world when we do the work that our gifts provide for, that are enabled by our giving. In Lent, we remember that planned giving is an essential part of faith-based fundraising. The dust to dust is a powerful reminder that one day we will no longer be here, and planned gifts and estate gifts are a way to keep our legacy going. At Easter, I love to remind people that we are so excited, we can't help but be motivated by the love and joy and work of the church. And we do this to a world that is longing for love. We are so excited to say Alleluia, that we get it out there. And on Pentecost, even this coming Sunday, we remember that we are scattered in all directions as the wind blows us, healing, feeding, comforting, teaching, faithfully loving a hungry and needful world. The feasts themselves also provide some opportunities. And again, when we look at our liturgical calendar and use it as another way into our stewardship, we can think about how these moments can be powerful reminders of our gifts. I'm not going to go through each of them, but you will get these slides. I will send them off to you so that you have access to everything that I've presented today in English and in Spanish. And you can look at these. Imagine what it would be like, for example, at the presentation, when you glimpse the church, what do you see? And it helps us understand that vision that the church can be and get that message out to our members. You can be a part of this work too, this mission that we are all engaged in. Or the transfiguration, if we truly saw the face of Jesus in each other, how would we treat our neighbors? How would we provide for all their needs? As you engage the liturgical calendar and year-round stewardship formation, I think about coffee hours and forums and Zoom groups, ways that you can get people talking in small groups about money. When we share our stories about money, when we share our stories about faith and our journey with money, they're really pastoral, wonderful conversations. When we engage our pledge campaign and we ask each other to join us in making gifts, those conversations are deeply personal. I always remind volunteers before they go out and solicit donations, whether they're doing it for a nonprofit or for a church, that what they are about to hear from the people that they're engaging with is going to be really big. And it may or may not be about the money. It may be about everything else that we attach to money. We use money as a metaphor for all kinds of things in our lives, for our success, for our feelings of failure, for our hopes and our dreams, for our security and our insecurity, for the things that we plan and the things that we don't plan. And those are the stories that are likely to come up when you're talking about faith and money with people. So they're deeply pastoral, sometimes even confidential, and always beautiful and warm. When we can share on that level, that vulnerable level with each other about our gifts and our giving and our motivations for giving, we really break open our own generosity and abundance. Finally, I want to talk about some deeper level things that you can do in your formation and generosity this year. TENS has a toolkit for year-round stewardship. You can get it from our resource library. The link is there and we'll send it out to you later. This is an in-depth instruction sheet on how to use every month of the year and the liturgical cycle that it comes in to associate different ministries with activities and remind people about everything the church is doing. And we even have a spreadsheet because we're that kind of people. I'm going to share it with you and show it to you and talk a little bit about it. This is kind of some next level stewardship formation. We give you this tool so that you can take a theme for each month and put in the activities that will bring out spirituality, a particular ministry you want to focus on, so that rotates throughout the year, a finance piece, so maybe it's about how to make tax-wise year-end giving, or how to write a will, or how to include your investments in your giving. So a finance piece that comes out, and these are things that can be put in your newsletter or things that can be brought into a forum or an education block. Something about the environment, because sustainability isn't just about our finances, it's about our impact on the world and the globe. So what are you doing in a particular month that you can emphasize your work on the environment and your work on the world? Your outreach. So what are you doing each month in a special way to promote an outreach of your ministry? Who are you reaching out to? I say this to remind us that your church does great work in outreach, whether you know it or not, whether you realize it or not. A few years ago, a nonprofit consulting group that works mostly in capital campaigns, they're called Partners for Sacred Spaces. They released a study, a really interesting study, that talks about the impact that a community of faith has on the world around it. And this is what they found. Across the United States and Canada, every temple, mosque, synagogue, and church, so multi-faith and ecumenical, looking at all of these houses of worship, each one of them puts out an average of $1.1 million worth of service to the community just by being there, by hosting meeting spaces, perhaps by some of the literal work that you do to feed or clothe or care for people. And that takes into account churches with massive outreach programs and tiny churches that are doing just a little, but a whole lot for them. $1.1 million of service in your community every year at a bare minimum as an average. This is amazing, right? So as you think about your outreach, know that your community values you. You have a role there, you have an impact. And this is why we do what we do. This is why we raise the money and do the mission of our work and our church. I want to conclude by letting you know about this year's theme for our annual pledge campaign materials. TENS releases a full package of annual pledge campaign materials every year, and ours will be ready for download on June 1st. And you'll have everything you need to run a fall campaign. You can run it as it is, or we give it to you in Microsoft Word so that you can adapt it and change it. We want you to localize it and make it ready for your context. Our theme this year comes from James 1:17. Every generous act and every perfect gift comes from God above. And so every perfect gift is the theme that we've used for our resources in English and in Spanish. And we use the metaphor of transformation from the chrysalis to the butterfly to talk about how our gifts are transformed when the church receives them. We take the gifts of time, talent, and treasure, and we move them through our church into ministry, guided by the Holy Spirit, guided by our communities. I hope that you'll discover these and use them in whatever ways. You have free access to them because you all are TENS members. And so all you need to do is go on our website. There's a password, which the secret password is James 1:17, 1:17. And that will give you everything you need to run your stewardship and your pledge campaign this year.